G'day guys and welcome, my name's Michael and I am the DeadAussieGamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Today we're going to be talking about rolling with backstory. Now, stop me if this sounds familiar. You are a GM and you're about to start a brand new game, and when one of your players shows up with a backstory. This is a great one, with a gripping tale that shows the origin story of a hero in the waiting for a grand adventure. But then when the player sits down, well, it's just them. There's no real character, there's no real personality, it's just the same sort of thing you've seen them play 110 times before. Well, this is a sad truth of what I feel a lot of players go through. And it's not because they're not creative. It's not because they can't perform or that they're shy. There is a disassociation between people who have talent with writing and as authors and people who have talent as performers and entertainers. Today I'm going to be talking about how one can marry the two and be both great at writing an awesome and interesting backstory and at the same time use that backstory to portray a vivid and awesome character at your next campaign. So, where we start with all good things is with the backstory itself. Now, far be it from me to tell anyone how to write a great backstory, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm an okay writer. I'm not a grand teller of tales. I'm a performer. I'm an entertainer. I'm an actor. I have done writing myself, but, you know, if I were to put down my writing on a page, I know that there are authors out there who would look at me like I was some sort of child with crayons, and, you know, that's my thing. But I do know one very big difference between writing a good backstory and writing a good character backstory, and that is, of course, the 3 golden goals. Now, when we write a backstory to tell the origin story, of course the story itself is meant to entertain our GM. We're also supposed to explore and bring to life the words on our page in the form of our performance at the table. For that, we need 3 main goals in every single backstory we write for an RPG campaign. The first, why is your character invested in the adventure that your GM is putting forward? This is the most important question you can ask yourself when writing a backstory. If you don't have a connection to the adventure itself, your GM needs to work 10 times as hard just to keep you there, let alone be able to explore more aspects of your story. It serves you an infinite amount of benefit to make the GM's life easy by having your character interested in what's going on around them. For example, a long time ago, I played an adventure with a group of people who asked me, and I want to point this out, they asked me to run an adventure in Numeria, which in Pathfinder is the land of savage science, a marriage between fantasy and science fiction. I wrote a grand adventure for them. They arrived at the first town and basically said, we do not want to go to Numenera. We instead want to go over here because we have our own personal quests to attend to. Well, I mean, that's great. It's fantastic. I'm so glad you guys have backstory, but the adventure's here. This is what I've written. This is what you guys asked me to write. So it becomes difficult to then try to manipulate the group to go on the adventure. It's not what a GM should be doing. So always make sure your characters have a way to tie themselves to the adventure your GM is running. Number 2. Whether or not your party is meeting each other for the first time, if you've known each other for years and done many adventures together, whatever the origin for it is, your character backstory needs to include a reason for your character to be invested in the success of the party. It can't have characters who are just completely self-interested and are just going to be lone wolfing it their way through an adventure. It doesn't work, it doesn't happen, and your GM is going to stress out. Instead, try to add some sort of reason why your character would tangibly be interested in traveling with people. Maybe your character is a bit of a loner, but has decided that there is actually some merit in traveling in a group. Perhaps your character is running away from something. There is an evil villain out for you specifically, and of course, these group of adventurers who also happen to be on the same adventure as you may prove to be quite useful allies in the days to come. Maybe your character has been manipulated here by another family member. Someone has told you to care for the people in this group, and you are invested or indebted to that person who has asked this favor. Whatever it is, your character must always stay invested in the group. What this means is that you won't be betraying the group. You won't be turning on them. At least not without a bit of GM influence. But I'm going to leave that out there. If you want to betray the group, if you want to work against the group, always talk to your GM. Okay. Lastly, you need to have your self-motivating goal. Now, this is the smallest of the golden goals, but it is still important. Having a character who is simply on the adventure because that's the adventure is equally as boring as someone who is on their own personal goal with absolutely no interest in what's going on around them. You need to find a good balance between the two, and having a self-motivation means that during quiet periods of time, downtime, rest cycles, or whatever, your character can instigate some really great side stories. My character, for example, in one of the adventures I'm currently playing, is a Hell Knight who accidentally blew up a Hell Knight library and a large receptacle of Thessalonian knowledge. That is why I am on this adventure, to go and find more information on this ancient empire called Thessalon. On the other hand, my character is trying to basically win favor with his own family. His family are strong, paladin-esque, very mighty, very righteous, whereas my character is a spellcaster, weak-bodied, very, sort of simple-minded, but at the same time wants to be acknowledged by his family. So while I'm on this quest to go and find artifacts, my character is growing from, just the adventure itself. I'm becoming stronger. My self-quest might be things like, during downtime, I send a letter back to the Hell Knight Order that I belong to. A letter addressed to my father, who's a captain in one of the orders, and I tell him about my adventure. But one day these missives get intercepted, and someone tries to manipulate me, tries to kidnap me to use against my father. This is the kind of self-story that creates a good side arc, And you want to keep doing that because your GM does have moments where they have mind blanks. They have those times where there's writer's block and it's difficult to come up with more story. Your self-story, your self-motivation can give them that spark that they need to make something cool and fun and interesting. But we shouldn't be holding that against the GM and saying, hey, you know what? We've been playing for 3 months and you haven't done anything with my backstory. What's up with that? Don't worry about that. The self stuff is just there. It's that nice little garnish. It's the garnish on your character that can then blossom into something bigger. All right. We've covered backstory. That is the difference between writing a backstory for a novel and writing a backstory for a playable character. Now, once we have this backstory, once we have those golden rules, those golden goals, we then want to start shaping our character's identity. And there are lots of influences for our character's identity. But we want to start with the most basic and the most foundational. That is, of course, culture, race, and gender. Now, I didn't put gender up on the list mostly because it doesn't fit, but also because it's a hot topic that I want to touch on very briefly, and I will at some point do a bigger topic on gender identity in role-playing games, but this is not that video. So, when we shape our character, we need to acknowledge where we're from. The culture and the surroundings of this character will, of course, influence your character's beliefs, their values, their ideas, and that helps shape your identity. For example, if your character were to come from, let's say, Irison. In the world of Pathfinder, Irison is very similar to the frigid Siberian and Russian lands. And of course, they have a very strong dislike of witches and witchcraft because they are the current reigning government, using their wintry magics to try and influence the world, maintain slavery, and of course, ensure that monsters are living comfortably and happily in the various places of Irison. Now, this might shape your character to dislike or distrust magic. On the other hand, your character might be quite monstrous and is quite used to being the alpha of the society that he happens to be in. Whatever the case is, the culture is what you want to be looking at for the shaping of the character's belief structure. You then have the character's race. Now, race is, I want to say this, race is a guideline. For example, when we think of the gnomes, we always think, oh, these really energetic guys who are like always talking really, really fast, and when a gnome wants to talk, the gnome will talk forever. And because gnomes are really energetic and really cool and really fun, and they talk really fast, and this is how they do, the stereotypes of the races are fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but I prefer it when people use them as guidelines to shape something more. Like a gnome, for example, is not just a big ball of energy. They're someone who needs to experience brand new things. So having, say, a gnome patissier, someone who makes treats and sweets and candies, but uses different techniques, is equally as filled with experience as someone who runs around and changes jobs every few days. This is important when defining our race. The race needs to kind of bring that element into the character and just add that bit of flavor, that little twist of flavor. Some races can even help shape the identity further by creating a barrier between the culture and the race. For example, if you come from, and I'm going to be using Pathfinder as a setting because, guys, you guys know me. I know Pathfinder like the back of my hand, so I'm not going to pretend like I know the Forgotten Realm lore as much as I do the Pathfinder one. So, put down your pitchforks. So, if you come from, say, the Chelish lands, the Tiefling and the Halflings are considered to be second-class citizens. So, playing a race, like, for example, the Halfling, becomes entirely different based on the fact that you are in Cheliax, as opposed to, say, Halflings in Varesia, who are traveling and wanderers. They are people who worship the god of travel and the god of dreams. They have a relatively wondrous lifestyle living in and amongst human societies. So, the race also plays a strong part, not just from a prejudice point of view, but also from that stereotype point of view that we were talking about with the gnomes. Okay. Lastly, gender. Now, gender is really important, but again, I'm not going to be touching onto it too deeply. What I will say about gender is this. Gender is a spectrum. It is something that we need to acknowledge is a huge topic at the moment. And you want to make sure that if you are including a gender identity as part of your character, then you need to either have it written into the story prior to the game, at which point during the game it should just simply be an accepted fact between the GM, between the group. You might come across NPCs who don't understand that, and there may be some drama there, but if there's not, don't go fishing for it. And the second is someone who is learning their gender identity during the course of the game. If you are looking at doing that category, then I urge you talk to your party and your GM, mostly because people don't generally like looking at political issues during social gatherings like Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. It's something that you want to definitely just make sure that everyone is happy to explore and to play comfortably. I've played for example, on a table on the live stream channel for Dungeons and Dragons with a non-binary character, party member, that is, not with a character. Although I never really thought about it, but no, that's me. And for me, I had no issue with that. My character had no issue with them being non-binary. My character had no issue with the way they were portraying a non-binary character. It was fine. It was just something that we accepted. So, yes, if you want to be looking at that, go from those angles. What you shouldn't be doing, and this goes for any kind of politics, is you shouldn't be trying to use culture, race, or gender as a means to stir up drama at your table. Just avoid it. Don't do that. I recently actually a long time ago. I say recently all the time. A long time ago, I played with a character who as a player had come out and said that he identified as a female. And that was fine. No one had an issue with that. The issue we did have, though, was that the characters that he played were all female. That wasn't the issue. And the problem was that all these female characters were of the damsel in distress archetype. They were incapable of doing anything heroic, anything adventurous. They were insanely hygienic and clean, refused to, even to the point where they refused to go into certain places because there was an unbeaten road, or there was dirt in the air or something. And anytime something happened, they would scream, cry out, and ask for help from the group. The issue wasn't with this person or their gender identity or even the character that they were portraying. It was entirely based on the fact that they were portraying a female character in a very negative way that wasn't an adventurer. It just wasn't supposed to be an adventurer. It was supposed to be this very needy princess from yon high tower who wanted to be rescued, but was following the knights who were rescuing them. I don't know. It was so weird. And that was what we had an issue with. We had an issue because this player was forcing that political problem in such a negative way that we had no choice but to respond to it. And eventually when we turned and said, look, we would not take this character out with us, it then turned into is it because she's a woman? No, it's because she's hapless. We will happily take a woman who is capable of casting spells and is a valuable boon to the group. Or a barbarian woman, someone who is capable of, carrying a baby on their chest and wielding an axe to rip the head off an orc. These are fine. There's no issues with those. What we had issues with this character. Anyway, yes, do not create drama with culture, race, or gender identity. That. Okay. Moving on to personality. Now, personality comes in many shapes, flavors, sizes, and forms. I highly recommend looking at personality archetypes and trying to portray the one that you feel will fit best into what group you're in. If you want to be a fun character, then look at playing archetypes like the clown or the moral compass, someone who is able to keep the group moving in an optimistic fashion. Building your personality around that ideal of what you want to be focused on, that's going to help shape that personality because you've built it on the right foundations: culture, race, gender. If you want to play a broody character, sure, play a broody character. Have a bit of grumpiness to you. As long as, again, you remember your main golden goals. Stick to the adventure, keep with the group, and always push towards your self-motivation. Don't forget the party because you're in a lone wolf mood. Don't only push your agenda because you are the most important person in the world. Remember these aspects if you want to play that archetype. Do you want to play the reliable hero? Do you want to play someone who is just pleasant to be around? Or maybe you want to play someone who is dealing with depression and sadness. Maybe they're on an adventure as a last hurrah before they're supposed to die of a terminal illness, and you want to portray that sort of sense of existential dread that looms over this character. Whatever it is. The personality is built on archetype, so pick which one you want to portray, and then just go for it. Really kind of lay it in there. Because you have your motivations that'll guide you. You'll have your culture and your race and your gender, which will shape it. And your personality will just give you that nice little focal point that'll keep you on track as to what you want to do. Because if you find yourself sitting there and going, you know what? I decided that I wanted to make the funny character, and I haven't done or said anything funny. Maybe I should look at something next time. Maybe I should crack a joke at this, or maybe I should do something silly. Maybe my character reacts in a particular way to being hit by a sword, like, you know what? I've seen more blood when I cut myself shaving this morning. Have those moments. The last thing you want to look at when you build your identity is your character's training. Now, the character training is almost like, how is your character built by the backstory? Is your character built through tragedy? Has your character become an adventurer because of loss? Maybe your character was built on the back of discipline. Maybe they were trained as a soldier or a monk. Maybe your character was built on the back of circumstance. Luck and fate, being what they are, guided your character along this path, and therefore your character now still allows the winds of fate to change their destiny. The training, the evolution of this character is the final piece. Because as long as we remember what shaped our character, what guided that character to the starting point of our adventure, we can keep riding that wave through the tale as it's told. I'm going to give you guys an example of the character I'm currently playing, Yormund Gale. In the adventure of Descent to Avernus Blood War, I wrote the character based entirely on the idea that he was supposed to be the group's, glue. Playing in a group with so many evil characters, it's very easy for everyone to be motivated entirely by their sense of self. So I built a character whose goal it was to keep everyone together. So, connection to the adventure. All we knew at the time was we were going to hell. Cool. My character is going to hell. My character is going to hell because he believes that after being excommunicated, his sister's soul was banished to hell. The demon or whoever had possessed his sister's mind and forced her to commit the atrocities that had her condemned to hell is likely down there as well. Maybe if I go to hell, I can find some answers while I'm down there. Connection to the party. My character used to be a soldier. I used to have my own team, my own command, and now they're gone. Because I too was excommunicated from the kingdom I served. The group represents a new bunch of allies who I can use to further my goals, keeping them happy, keeping them of high morale, and keeping them feeling as though if they travel with me, they will do well, means that I will inevitably conquer my goal. My sense of self? What do I want to do? I want to return to Earth and make the kingdom that banished me and exiled me and my sister, make them pay at any cost. This also includes the church to which my character was a paladin of. So those are my 3 golden goals. Identity. Culture. Character comes from a Western culture. Western cultures, generally speaking, have a very, very strong sense of self, like the whole hierarchy between, governments and systems and politics. In addition, there is also a lingering sense of greed that comes from human cultures as well. So I latched onto the idea that, well, I came from a place where they were worried about things like politics. They were worried about things like, one of our commanding officers was possessed by a demon. We can't let other kingdoms know that we are weak. That'll cause trouble. This is what sparked my problems. So the culture is there. Race. Well, I'm a dragonborn. Dragonborns are, of course, dragon-like creatures, and, well, there's a certain reverence that comes about for them. So I decided, cool, I'm going to go with just that. I am going to play a Dragonborn character who is revered because of his soldiery nature. He's a veteran warrior, and that's why people respect him. He has this conquering presence and a command about him. We then look at his gender identity. Because, of course, I didn't want to really focus on that as part of the character, in the backstory, I've just made him reflecting me. Basically just a male... cisgender male? Yes. That's it. Personality. Now, the personality archetype that I wanted to have, as I mentioned, I wanted to create a character who was like the glue of this group. So I needed someone who was forceful, but at the same time kind. Someone who worked almost like a father figure, but at the same time had that sense of, I suppose, authority in the same way that a soldier would. So I looked at some inspirations, such as, Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones was such a big influence on how I wanted to play the leadership role, and a few others. And that's what I took on board. And lastly, the training. Well, my character was trained as a soldier, trained as a paladin, in fact. And even now, he still follows a lot of the training. I still use a lot of my abilities and my powers, and I run the group, as it were, or I command the group, the same way my character would have commanded a group of captains or generals underneath him. That is how this whole thing works, from taking your written backstory and using it to inspire your character roleplay. Alright guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat below, and of course I will try to respond to them as quickly as I can. Things have been really hectic, obviously, as we get close to the holiday season, so please don't feel as though my absence from things like Discord and stuff reflect me no longer loving you guys, because I love you guys so much, and I want to keep chatting and keep live and keep active, so do encourage me to do that. Tag me on everything, because yeah, that's how I'll do it. Anyway guys, I'll stop rambling. Thank you so much again. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you've got any suggestions for videos and the like that you would like me to make, then please leave them in the chat below, and I will see to adding them to the list. Till next time guys, as always, game hard or die trying. See yas.